a Hellcat.
Sweet, so now I'm going to be starting on my fuel tank and my entire fuel system. So this is a huge step for the build. I'm going to install a sweet fill neck, hydromats. These are so your fuel system does not suck air. I'm really excited for this fill neck. It's going to look badass. So what I'm gonna do now is I'm going to weld the inside of the tank so it's welded on the outside and the inside, just to make sure that it's actually going to be 100% sealed. It'll make me feel better and I'll be able to sleep at night. So since I'm actually going to be running fuel nets in the bottom of the tank, these guys right there, I need this one because it's a rollover vent. If you roll over the car, a ball goes into the bottom, which goes to the top, and then it stops fuel from spilling everywhere, but it's still a vent. Damn it, I dropped my chips. Okay, so let's go over a few things here. I have 2 hydromats and 2 setups for the side of the tank and adapting to the actual hydromat. These are my hydromats, and these are designed to suck the fuel from both sides of the tank rather than just one inlet. So when you corner hard and the fluid goes to the left side or the right side, it's still gonna suck fluid into the actual inlet. This is the best bet. I'm not running one, I'm running 2 fuel systems for my engines, one for each, so each engine has its full system. And this system is going to be good for 1400 horsepower with E85, and on pump fuel, it'll be good for at least 1600 horsepower. I'm gonna be running on E85 though, so I'm gonna be good for fuel for 1400 horsepower. Is I have to get the actual hydromat and turn it into a hardline. And this is the start of the AN tower, and I actually really don't like it. It's way too long for me. I'm gonna be running 5/8 hardline inside of my tank from the actual hydromat to the side of the tank. And the reason I'm doing that is because I'm running E85, and E85 is very corrosive to rubber, so I don't want a rubber line inside of the actual tank. And I want it to actually last years on end with no problems. So this was the only way to get it to the actual hydromat with fittings. And it's a male to 2 females, then back to male. So what I think I'm gonna do is I'm going to remove this female, and I am going to cut these AN fittings, and I'm going to weld these 2 together, and then I still can install it into the hydromat, and then I can still install it into my actual hard line. So I'm basically going to cut right here, get this AN fitting off, and then on this one, I'm gonna cut this AN fitting off, and then I'm going to weld them together, and then it'll be much shorter, much cleaner, and I'm a happy boy. So now I'm gonna smooth everything out, and I'm going to make a V so I can weld all the way around it. Then I'll make it into a hex again. So as you can see right here, I chamfered them, so when I weld them together, I can just fill that actual groove. And then what I'm gonna do is I'm going to grind down the weld until it's the exact same size as the blue one. On the left is the original what I had, and the right is the modified that I made, and it's making way less fittings, and no, it will not leak, and it's going to work just fine. I'm letting it cool in between each weld, and now I'm gonna move on and do this one as well, and I know it's gonna work very, very well. Got my first one done, and this one turned out really, really nice. So I'm gonna sand this all flat so it's still gonna be in a hex shape, and then this will work. It's going to save a lot of length. Got the fitting all done. It's all in a perfect hex, so I can use it just like a normal AN fitting. And then she threads in the hydromat right here. No worries, just slides right in, no problem. That turned out very, very nice. So next thing is the hard lines and mocking it up in the tank. My next step is to get the hard lines into the tank, but I am missing the hard lines. I noticed that when I looked through my box, so I'm gonna pick that up tomorrow. And in the meantime, I'm going to rigid mount my fuel tank. I'm gonna weld metal on an angle out to here, and then I'm gonna have a bolt that'll go right there. Same with the other side. And then I'm gonna have one from my subframe to my actual gas tank. But seriously though, the tank back there looks wild. It's just chilling there, looking badass. So now what I gotta do is I gotta weld on brackets to bolt the actual fuel tank to the frame. All right, I got it back into the car and it's sitting exactly where it's gotta be. And there's my front mount, side mount, and other side mount. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to drill a hole right down in there, and I'm going to put a nut in it, and then I'm going to continue on and do that one. I'm gonna make sure it's all squared up in here, looking pretty good. So I'm gonna drill some holes. I got the shivers. Tank's all bolted in, so now what I'm thinking of doing is adding some braces. It's going to need more structure. Adding this on each mount is going to make a huge difference, so I'm going to weld in one here and one here. All right, I just did a whole bunch of welding and made these braces a little bit stronger. So now I threw in my hydromats, and basically it will suck fuel from all corners of the tank. And I also have my baffle in. With this hydromat, I will actually be converting it to hard lines inside of the tank so the E85 won't deteriorate the hose. So here's my hard line. I'm going to have to cut it and bend it to go from here to the side of the tank, which is here. So it's going to have a bung, and this is what this contraption's for. So I'm going to be drilling a hole, pushing this blue one through and welding it on, and then these are going to thread on to the inside of the tank, and that is going to convert it to the hard line. So everything's going to be metal in here, so nothing will deteriorate. So I can run race fuel no matter which fuel I want, I can use. This is a very, very serious fuel system. So I cut a piece a little long, so when I'm actually mocking this up, I can run it through a hole that I drill. I'm gonna try and get the tightest bend possible so I can quickly get it to the side of the tank, because the slower the turn I go, the higher the bung is gonna be and the worse for fuel starvation. I want a quick turn down to here if I can. I decided I'm gonna take the hex off this fitting, and then I'm going to drill a hole that it fits into perfectly, and I'm going to weld it in like that. So I'm actually going to delete all this contraption of fittings to make it work, but I think I just need this one if I can weld it into the actual tank. Got them both all sanded down, so now they're just round and I can weld them on. I'm gonna paint the frames I made for my tank holders, just so it's all sealed and primed and purple, obviously.
Bet you never know. Say we have the power, but there's things we touch the road. Tell them say we ready, clip them.
Right on. So I got my bung welded right to the side of my tank, and the threads are still on the inside. So what I have to do now is adapt it to an actual hard line that is going to go to a fuel mat. This is my hydromat. It's going down there, and it's just going to sit there and just like that. So I'm gonna run one here and one there, and then I'm splitting it with a baffle. So the trick with this stuff is I'm going to actually straighten it, because as you can see, I'm going from this position down to the bottom of the tank. So I actually need 90 degrees in here, right? And this stuff does bend easily, but it also kinks easily. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually straighten it out first like this. As you can see, I got this length basically perfectly straight. So now I'm going to do my 90. So I'm gonna do my 90 in as quick of a form as I can. And on the ends, I'm going to make sure that I have untouched spots that aren't bent, and that's where my fittings are gonna go, because it can't go on a bent spot with the fittings or it will not seal correctly. So there's my nice 90. I did the best I possibly could. So what I'm going to do now is I'm gonna cut it where it's getting straight. So where I actually have not bent, which would be about here. Yeah, I did bend here, but I need a couple inches, like I said. And same with down here, I'll cut because I actually have my bend starting up there. It has to be straight or it will not seal. Now I just gotta clean up the ends. All cleaned up. Since this is untouched territory and it's dead straight, same with this end, look how easily that slides on. And as you can see, when it gets to the bend, it will stop. And that is because of the bend. So that's why you cannot have it seal on the bend. So I've got this fitting on right there. And then I'm going to install this little brass guy. And so when this gets tightened down onto the other fitting, it'll actually compress this brass guy into the aluminum tube, and that is going to seal it for good. So here's the fitting you saw me make earlier. I literally welded two together and then made it into a hex. This is what I'm going to install onto my actual brass guy. So that's gonna thread on there. And then I'm gonna tighten him down tightly, snugly, and that's it. Don't over torque, just go by feel. Just kidding, use an impact on it. All right, so I'm going to give it the blowjob test. So I'm literally going to stick my mouth right here and then cover this with my thumb. And I'm going to see if I actually lose pressure when I'm actually pushing on with my lungs. And if I run out of breath, or if my breath is actually coming out, that means it's leaking, right? But if I don't lose any air out of my lungs, it's actually sealed. That's good, I didn't lose any air, so that means this fitting is leak free. So I'm going to install the next one and I'm gonna be decent. Actually, what I'm gonna do here is I'm going to install this into the hydromat. The first fitting I did, just threading her on right there. It doesn't need any tape or anything. And then I'm going to install it into the tank and mock up where my fittings has to be and make sure that I have the fitting on the correct angle, because if I need to make it actually point up or down. Sweet, so I got my hydromat in there. She fits in there snug. It was all planned out. Everything looks good. So now, this is where the fitting is going. That looks gorgeous. It's fitting perfect. It goes exactly to my hole over here. So looking on the outside of the tank, I've got to actually line this up right there and then weld it on. So I'm going to thread it on and just kind of get it in position, fully weld the bung, and then it's 100% complete. That is lovely right there. So I'm going to actually hold it in that exact position, but looking inside of the tank, it looks beautiful. The mat is basically from end to end on the tank. It's looking awesome. So what I'm gonna do is weld that baby on. So my next step is to get my top ready to be welded on. Obviously it's not, I just set it on top, but what I gotta do is I gotta get my nasty top hat. So I need to cut a hole and drill holes and everything before I actually wanna weld this thing on.
Bet you never know. Say we have the power, but there's things we touch the road.
Sweet, so this is what I got marked out. All these holes need drilled out because there's a plate that goes underneath inside of the tank, and then there's one that goes on top and it gets bolted in. Then I need all this center to be removed. And let's give her a shot. Look at that, just falls right in as if it was supposed to. So now I'm gonna try and be smart. So let's see what this total width is. It's 7. And the total height is 4. So I think if I use 4-inch hole saws, I'll be able to make a hole here and a hole here, and it'll cut most of it out. So that worked amazing. So I got that exact shape I needed. It's literally a sphere and a sphere and then a center that is a little bit, it's basically a widened circle. So I'm gonna do another hole here, get that other, and then I'm gonna have just a little piece of aluminum to cut out in here. So here's my tank, and here's the inside of the tank. So now I can start assembling this thing and welding in baffles because I'm putting a cross in, like you remember from the other episode. So here's the center baffle. I'm going to place it about 1/2 inch from the bottom of the tank so some fuel can go back and forth. And then when I hit a corner hard, it's going to stop on the side because there's so much volume and it can't go through that hole that quickly, so it stops. And rather than all the fuel sloshing to one side, it'll actually be in this pocket for this fuel pump, and there'll be some in this for this fuel pump. And now I'm going to actually add 2 more baffles. So I'm gonna add one here and one here. So the forward to back motion for when I launch, it'll wanna keep the fuel into the front of the tank. And then there's the other 2 baffles. So it'll help sloshing forward and backward and left and right. So it's going to act like it's just a little fuel tank, but there's multiple of them and it can suck from either or. So it is going to be freaking sick. I've even got everything fitting tight. Like, look at that, very, very tight. But these guys I'm gonna have up because I don't want it to actually rub on the actual, because I don't want it to rub on the actual hydromat because they're worth a lot of money, and don't want to have any failures. So I'm gonna make sure there's lots of room, and this will be held from going left and right because this is a rigid piece of aluminum. It's actually 5/8 aluminum tube that I'm using right here. That is a massive amount of fuel that is going to be flowing through there. So I have a couple liters of water in there, and I'm just going to explain a bit why I'm putting baffles in. Here's my 2 outlets, and I'm going to put a baffle here and baffles here, obviously. But I'm going to show you what happens to the fluid once things are moving around. So this is left to right, and as you can see, the water is almost going all the way to one side. So if I'm taking a corner hard, the one pump might get completely starved from fuel. And this is with the baffle in, and as you can see, swashing left to right. I just threw a jerry can full into my tank. My math was definitely right on the 40+ liters. Fuel actually has smaller atoms in it, so it can actually get in through smaller holes than water. So if I test it with water and be fine, and then put it in the car and everything, and then put fuel in it, and it could potentially leak because the atoms are actually smaller in gas. So it's definitely important to check with gas just to make sure. All right, so I just cleaned the tank, I leak tested it, I checked if the baffles fit, and everything's done with my hardline. It is time to fully assemble this 1,000 horsepower fuel cell. Yahoo! Look at that. Oh my god. So it's swelled up a bit so fuel can stay inside of it. See how I push it in and it'll come back out? It's designed like that so fuel can get sucked in and be there for whenever the pump needs it. It's actually very, very, very impressive, and they work great, and I'm excited to try them out. Looking awesome. That looks freaking beautiful. Oh, damn. Woo! All right, so now it's time for me to put the middle baffle in, and I'm going to try and put it down as low as I possibly can to individualize this a bit. So when I fill it, it's going to be filling both of them because it'll gradually change. But when hard turning, it'll actually just literally stay individualized. Because as long as the mats are wet, it will be good for not starving. All right, so I got my baffles in and it's looking wild. I am literally ready to weld this in, and that's exactly what I'm gonna do. Everything is done. I can put the top on, fully weld that, and these gotta be real pretty welds. Finally done, and it looks amazing. Before I actually install my fuel cell, I'm going to install my fuel pumps. And I've designed them to bolt up down here, and I'm gonna put them in right now and get everything mocked up. Here's my massive fuel pump, and I am running 2 of them, 1 for each engine. Pretty good stuff. It's AEM, runs 120 PSI at 300 liters per hour. I made some huge washers at work, so I'm going to run a washer in between the actual mount for my fuel pumps so it doesn't get high frequency vibration. This thing is evolving into a race car. It's finally time to install my beautiful fuel cell that I made. This is gonna look so nasty. Absolutely insane. Wow, honestly, that looks wild. I'm really digging this look. That literally looks bananas. I honestly can't get over how that looks. It looks so wild. Every angle, oh man. So this is the exact look it will look without the bumper on, but I don't have my taillights in, so keep that in mind. Going down, and then there's my fuel pumps. A little shot from underneath. That is genius. That is awesome. I am so ecstatic about this. This is exactly how I pictured the car.